The Transformers 1 trailer is here, and honestly, I'm kinda into it. But what can we glean from this trailer, and what did you possibly miss? With some of the establishing shots we get on Cybertron, we get a shot of Hal's bar. Hal's bar is kinda interesting. Now, while not inherently an Easter egg directly in terms of something specific we've seen before, it does seem to have a similar look to another bar that Transformers fans would likely be a lot more familiar with, which also existed on Cybertron, though possibly later in its history, or maybe just not in this location. Mac Adams' old oil house, or just Mac Adams for short. Mac Adams is basically a bar for Transformers that appeared in the comics and has also appeared and been referred to in the animated television series and the movies. Mac Adams, while seemingly a simple oil house, has also been said to have its origins tied to Cybertron's Age of Expansion, and is actually made up partially of the body of the fallen titan Iaconus, who is buried beneath the land of Iacon. Mac Adams supposedly converted part of Iaconus' form into the oil house, so that's how it came to be. I think one of the most interesting things about Transformers 1 is that it gives us a lot of insight into how the characters we've come to know and love in Transformers became the folks that they are today. Take for instance one of the main characters of Transformers. Did you recognize him here? If you didn't, just an FYI that the trailer opens on not one, but two of the most famous Transformers characters of all time. While he might look a bit more slender than the version you're used to seeing, on the left that is, get this, Optimus Prime, everyone. But before he was Optimus Prime, and back when he was known instead as Orion Pax. What does this mean? That Transformers 1 actually takes place way before the events of some of the team's most famous stories on Earth. In fact, this film is actually going to be set long before Earth would have even existed. Orion Pax here is voiced by Chris Hemsworth, who lends his voice to this much younger version of Optimus Prime. The name of Orion Pax is actually referenced in the original Transformers cartoon as well. Orion Pax, like I said, isn't the only robot you might be confused about initially though. We also get another famous Transformers characters in that first shot, who is with Optimus Prime, or Orion Pax as he is here, and oddly seems rather chummy with him considering the history we know of these two together in terms of the greater story of Transformers. That's right, the person sitting next to Optimus is Megatron. Although before he was known as such, it's revealed in Transformers 1 that he went by another name, D16. That also might be why he looks so familiar to you. Lending their voice to this much younger version of the villainous leader of the Decepticons, who's not quite a villain yet, is Brian Tyree Henry. The name D16 is something that has been more recently established actually as Megatron's earlier name, but although it's a newer addition to his main continuity origin, the name itself is actually quite a bit older. It was actually taken from the original Japanese release of his Gen 1 toy. How cool is that? I love that. Another interesting thing about D16's appearance here is this design actually seems to be a reference to a specific look that he's had before. A look that we saw in the Marvel Comics days. In the trailer, he clearly has yellow eyes, and this combined with the styling and coloring of his helmet, which appears to be black here, seems to have been inspired by the look he had in Marvel Comics. Also, if you're thinking, wait a minute, his helmet looks blue in the Marvel Comics art, clearly, you are not wrong, but back then dark blues were often used to signify black because black ink was reserved for line work, and if you colored in something that was meant to be black with black ink, you'd kinda just end up with a blob on the page due to the inks that we had at the time. And no one wants to wear a blob helmet, let's be honest, especially not Megatron. He's got a fearless reputation to uphold after all, he can't be wearing a blob helmet. Beneath what appears to be Hal's bar, there is another sign that reads miner, like people that, you know, dig in the ground, miner. This is likely a place for the miners to gather, perhaps another bar, but specifically for the miners of Cybertron. In some cases, miner is one of the jobs that is often associated with Megatron's origin before the great conflict that happened between Decepticons and Autobots. Megatron is often seen as being more of a working class member before that happened, either having the job of miner or gladiator typically in the various origins that we've seen over the years for this character. What did miners mine on Cybertron? Some believe the planet to be made up of the same materials as the Cybertronians themselves, while others suggest that it's made up of just like various metals. In some stories, Megatron is even shown to be a miner of raw energon, which unsurprisingly would exist on Cybertron. This origin actually appears for Megatron in the IDW Transformers comics, so while technically being a miner, since Cybertronians consume, or rather can be powered by energon, would that mean in our society some miners, in terms of the Transformers, would be considered to be more like farmers? While Megatron's origin usually sees him tied to the lower class on Cybertron, Optimus Prime's origin has kind of been a little less focused throughout the years. However, it seems that based on the trailer, Orion Pax will be in a similar class to D16 here, as they obviously seem to be working together. This is interesting because it actually calls back to the origin that we saw for Optimus Prime in the Transformers cartoon, where he was established to have been a warehouse laborer on Cybertron who worked at the docks. B127 might also appear familiar to fans of Transformers. I know I was like, wait a minute, I know who that is, but some might be a little confused as to who this really is due to the robot's name, B127. In the trailer, he introduces himself to Orion Pax and D16 as B127. He also says he's been experimenting with cooler names like Badassatron, which apparently is pronounced in a deeper voice. Badassatron. However, D16 decides instead that they are just gonna call him B for short. If that makes this Cybertronian seem even more familiar to you, it makes sense as to why. B is obviously implied to be short for, you know, Badassatron here, which is a name that I'm guessing D16 and Orion Pax probably think is a little too goofy to say in full. That's why they're just gonna call him B. But it's also a hint at B127's future as the famous and lovable Transformer, possibly even more popular at this point than Optimus and Megatron, maybe not but close, Bumblebee. I'm also so excited to see Keegan-Michael Key voicing this much younger version of Bumblebee. So many reasons for me to see this movie just keep coming up. Something that fans of specific stories from Transformers lore might not know is that this movie is actually tied to a bigger project, which was intended to create a more firmly established Transformers lore, which would act as the core of the lore for all stories. You see, there have been so many comic publishers, animated series, and movies in regards to Transformers that the lore has become somewhat splintered over the years, with different companies taking different approaches to the Transformers history and tweaking here and there to suit the ideas of their creatives and their story's needs. Because although Transformers is Hasbro, you know, other people have gotten the license to tell stories in that world. In 2010, Hasbro worked on a continuity that was intended to be the main established continuity for Transformers, finally trying to unify everything. Moving forward, it would be known as Aligned. Part of this aligned continuity is the story we're about to see explored in Transformers 1. That in the early days, Cybertron was a corrupt place steeped in basically extreme classism, with society drastically split by social status. During this time, Megatron and Optimus Prime were actually friends, and it was basically their falling out that greatly played into and caused basically the start of the Great War. So while Transformers 1 might seem like a new story to established fans and should act as a great jumping on point for new fans, it's actually from a pre-established canon that Hasbro created to help combine and unify all the various stories and histories explored across media so far in regards to the Transformers property. Pretty cool. This next one is pretty niche, which is why I saved it for my top spot. Only the eagle eyes will have spotted this one, only the people that have like really dug deep in Transformers lore. This is Icon 5000. Icon 5000, you may have spotted it, it's on like a sign. It's basically a Cybertronian motorsports race, and it appeared exclusively in the G1 Marvel UK comics. The Icon 5000 was considered to be Cybertron's #1 racing event. Think basically like the Indy 500, except instead of it being 500, or I guess in this case it would be 5,000 laps, it was actually 50 laps of a 500-mile circuit. Gosh, that's a long circuit. It would evolve over the years, and the Decepticons would actually end up turning it into more of like kind of a monster truck rally style event, where the winner was actually considered to be the least damaged contestant by the race's end. The event has also been referred to in the IDW comics and in the Beast Wars Uprising continuity. That's about it. I'm your host Amanda McKnight. Until next time, you stay nerdy.